Hey everyone, today I am making a crossbody bag with you. I am calling this bag the Kleier crossbody. One of my very good friends requested that I make a crossbody bag pattern for her that could be made just using measurements as opposed to needing pattern pieces. So that is what we are going to go ahead and do today. This bag is a medium-sized crossbody. It is about 11 inches wide and about 9 inches tall with a depth of about 2.5 inches. It features an exterior front pocket and a fully lined inside. This does not have any additional pockets on the inside. It is turned through the lining. You can optionally add on an interior zipper pocket, an interior slip pocket, whatever it is that you want to do. But for the purposes of this tutorial today, to try to keep it fairly straightforward, I have just done the exterior pocket. We've got the accent piece on the front in vinyl. The rest of the exterior is cotton woven, and I have used webbing for the strap. For this project, you will need your main fabric. I am using cotton woven, so I also need woven interfacing for that. If you choose vinyl for your main fabric, then you don't have to interface it. You will need your accent color. I am using vinyl for my accent. You will need your lining fabric. I am using cotton canvas. If you are using something that is thinner than cotton canvas, you may want to interface that also. If you are using waterproof canvas, you won't need interfacing for that. And if you like a little bit more structure to your bag, or you're using a thinner material for your main fabric, you may want to add some fleece to stabilize that a bit more. Other things that you will need for this project, in addition to the fabric itself, is your zippers. I'm using zipper by the yard. There will be an exterior zipper for the front pocket as well as for the top pocket. So I have 2 pulls and my zipper tape. It's a crossbody bag, so we need to make a strap. I will be using seatbelt webbing for mine. I will have a separate tutorial that just goes through how to make your own crossbody strap without using the webbing, but we're just going to use webbing for today. So I also have the swivel hooks and the sliders, 2 D-rings for attaching the strap connectors. As far as tools, we have an array of rulers. We will be using measurements for this particular crossbody bag. So I've got many different rulers there. A stapler, pliers to remove staples, rotary cutter, scissors, thread melter, point turner, which will come in very handy when we're doing the top zipper installation to help us get nice corners, and of course double-sided tape that we'll be using throughout. The first thing that I like to do is to press and interface my exterior cotton fabric. The base measurement that we're using for this pattern is 12 inches wide by 11 inches tall. So I have one piece of interfacing cut to those measurements that will form the back panel of the bag. Then I have a piece that is cut 12 inches wide by 8.5 inches tall, and that will form the bottom section of the front bag. And my vinyl will be the top contrasting section. I'm not going to be interfacing my vinyl. I'm going to pop these 2 pieces of interfacing onto my exterior fabric. What I am also going to do is interface a piece that is 2 inches wide and 6 inches tall, and that piece will form my strap connectors. I'm going to go and get those interfaced, and then we will cut out the pieces. From my interfaced fabric, I am now going to cut a 12 by 11 rectangle. A 12 by 8.5 inch rectangle. A 2 by 6 inch rectangle for the strap connectors. And from the scraps, I'm going to cut a 2 by 1.5 inch piece that we will use as a zipper end for the top zipper. And then from the bottom corners, we will cut out 1 1/4 inches, which we will then use as our end tabs for our exterior zipper. Make sure that you're using the bottom of your fabric if you have a directional print. And on the exterior piece, make sure that you're cutting it at the bottom of the 12-inch long side. So this is the top edge, this is the bottom edge, or that way if your print is non-directional. But make sure that where you're cutting out your boxes, it's at the bottom left and right side of your fabric. Exterior back, exterior front, the 2 D-ring connector pieces, zipper end tab here, and then these little pieces here that we just cut out from the bottom corners will form the end tabs for our exterior front pocket. If you went with a cotton choice for your exterior fabric, I also recommend stabilizing it. I am using fusible fleece to stabilize my exterior. I have pieces that are 1 inch shorter and 1 inch narrower than my exterior pieces to keep it out of the seam allowance. So there's a 1/2 inch around each of the edges. We also need to cut in the 1 1/4 inch on the bottom boxes here, and then we can fuse those on. The other part that we need to cut out for our exterior is our vinyl accent piece. I have done the accent piece for this bag as a split accent piece. I am using vinyl, and I'm going to be cutting it at 3.5 inches by 12 inches. And now I'm going to cut this piece into 2, and then the zipper will end up being between the 2 pieces. I guess I should show you that way. You can choose where to divide your vinyl based on your personal preference. I like to cut mine at 1 1/4, and then that makes this piece here 2 1/4 inches. So now we've got our exterior front that will look like this when it is sewn together with the zipper in here, and then our solid exterior back piece. Now we will cut our lining pieces. From the lining, we need to cut 3 pieces that are 12 inches wide by 11 inches tall, 2 of which will form the interior of the bag, and 1 of which will form the lining of the front pocket. This piece I'm going to set aside for the exterior front pocket lining, and these 2 pieces that I cut together, I'm going to cut out the corners for the boxes. The same measurements of 1 1/4 inch, making sure that I'm cutting it from the bottom side. So you want 12 across the top, 11 down. So I'm cutting it off this edge here. So for my lining fabric, I have 2 pieces cut 12 by 11 with the cutouts in the bottom corners, and another piece with no cutout that will be the pocket lining piece. The next thing that we're doing is sewing the exterior pocket of the bag. For this, you will need the bottom exterior piece, the 2 vinyl accent pieces, the pocket lining piece, a zipper that is cut to 11 inches long, a zipper pull, and the tabs that we cut from the bottom corner of our front and back exterior pieces. If you prefer, you can cut your tabs from the vinyl if you would rather have it be the same color on the end of your zippers. I'm using this for the contrast. I also like the cotton because it's a little thinner, which means that it's less bulky around your zipper. If you are not confident putting on zipper by the yard, you can use a pre-made zipper, or if you want to try doing zipper by the yard, I recommend having your zipper cut a little longer to start with, and once your pull is on, you can trim it down to the 11 inches. I have chosen 11 inches because it is just a little shorter than the width of our bag. Once we have the tabs on, it will reach all the way to the end, but it will keep the bulk of the zipper out of the side seam of the bag. First up, we're going to pop that zipper pull on. I like to melt the ends of my zipper tape so that it doesn't fray. Then I have a look at my zipper tape and I look to see which tooth is sticking further out at the end. So on this piece of tape, that is on my left side. Grabbing my zipper pull, I open up the tape and I'm going to take my zipper pull and slide it on that side first until it's nearly all the way through. Then I grab the other side, pinching both. I pinch this one here between my thumb and forefinger, and I kind of pull on the tape a little bit to keep it all the way to the left side of the zipper head. Then holding this one, I slide it in underneath, and then I use my index finger on my right hand to just push that pull on until it clicks into place. And there you can see that the zipper teeth are lined up. This is the side we started on with the tooth further out. It's still there. So when we slide our pull, you can see here that it is where it needs to be. And we'll just slide that to the middle of the zipper tape. What we're then going to do is sew the ends on to this zipper. Grab 2 of these scraps that we cut from the bottom corner, and you're going to sandwich the zipper tape between the 2 right sides of that scrap. I'm going to grab some clips, pop those on the end there, and then the same on the other side. Then I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance down the edge here with a straight stitch on both sides. Then I'm going to fold those open like this once they are sewn, and then I'm going to top stitch down here on either side to create the end tabs on our exterior zipper. For top stitching, I have set my needle into the far left position and I have increased my stitch length. I'm going to pull these tabs firmly. You can press those if you wish. I'm just going to pull on them to keep the folds nice and neat. And then using the inside edge of my presser foot as a guide, I'm going to sew along that edge. I'm going to start with the zipper 90 degrees off from the angle that we're going to be sewing our top stitching line. Back stitch on that edge, then turn, and then sew the actual top stitching line down parallel to that fold. Turn 90 degrees again, and back stitch along that edge there to keep the back stitching out of the top stitching line here. It's a little tricky to see on the black. And then repeat on the other side. going to set that zipper aside for the moment. And we are now going to attach the bottom accent piece to the exterior bottom print. I like to use a piece of double-sided tape to do this. I use 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape, and I will put a line across the uppermost edge of my exterior print. Remove the backing piece, and then lining up the edges, I will press that down. I'm going to head back over to the machine, and I'm going to sew along this uppermost edge at 1/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to fold it up, and I'm going to top stitch along the edge there. Something that I like to do to help me get a nice consistent seam allowance is know which needle position each seam allowance width is compared to the edge of my presser foot here. So for example, I need to sew 1/4 of an inch here. So I'm going to grab my ruler, and I'm going to pop it here at the edge of my fabric. And here you can see I'm 1/4 of an inch from the edge here. What I then like to do is line up my needle position with the edge of that ruler. So I drop the needle down, and I can see that where that needle is hitting, it's just a little narrow. So I'm just going to move my needle to the left slightly, make sure that it's fully up when you make the change, otherwise it won't kick in, and then check that again, and that is 1/4 of an inch. So now I know that if I keep my needle in that position on my machine, it's 6, then I will have an even 1 inch seam allowance here. And you can make note of those measurements so that you know that when you use this particular presser foot and you line up the edge of your fabric with the very edge of your presser foot here, lined up here with the edge of your fabric, if you have your needle set at that position for a straight stitch, you will have that even seam allowance. I make note of the number that I need to have, the needle position that I need to have for all the different seam allowances that I commonly use. So with that set up, I'm going to sew a straight stitch all the way down this strip of vinyl. Then I'm going to fold it out and top stitch. Then fold the vinyl. You can put a bit of double-sided tape here if you wish. I'm just going to fold it up. It's also up to you if you want to top stitch on the vinyl part or on the material, the cotton part there. I'm going to top stitch on the vinyl. I just prefer the way that it looks when I do it that way. And starting from this top edge here, I'm going to put my needle in the far left position, increase my stitch length to a top stitching length, and then again, using my presser foot as a guide, I'm going to be using this inner edge here with the needle in the far left position to get a consistent stitch length. If I line this part of the presser foot up, the just inside edge here, with this fold in the fabric, I will get a nice consistent top stitch line. And then, like we did before, do the back stitching on the side there, on the side seam, so that you won't see your back stitching at the very edge of your top stitch. And I just like to finger press that as I go to keep a nice fold. Turn again, and back stitch in the side seam there. Now that we have that first accent piece attached to our exterior front, we are ready to get our zipper installed. What we're going to do is fold the zipper that we prepared earlier in half, and we are going to line up the folds where we put the tabs on. We are then going to find the center of the zipper tape, not the center from the ends of the tabs because they might be slightly uneven. You want the center of your zipper tape. Pinch there and just do a little tiny snip to mark the center. Flip it around and repeat on the other side. You also need to decide if you would like your zipper to open from left to right or right to left. Most bags open from the left side. However, if you are left-handed or you prefer your zipper to go the other way, then you may want to have your pull open from the right-hand side. So with the centers marked there, we're also going to mark the center of our exterior pieces. So the same way, folding that in half, line the edges of your bag up. The vinyl may not be perfect. Sometimes vinyl stretches a little bit or your measurements may have been slightly off. Mine's hanging over a tiny bit, so I'm going to go based on the exterior fabric at the bottom, not the vinyl accent piece. Line up the seams at the side and then find the center here. Put a tiny little snip in. And I'm also going to do that on the exterior top. So we've got a center mark here, center mark here, here, and here, so we can get that all lined up. There will be some overhang here from the zipper tabs that we can trim down at the end. Grab your double-sided tape. We're going to put a line of double-sided tape across the upper edge of the bottom piece. We're also going to put a line of double-sided tape on the top and the bottom of our pocket lining piece, remembering that we're putting it along the 12-inch side. And we're also going to put a piece along the bottom here. I'm going to set that top piece aside just for the moment. And we're going to start with the bottom part. We're going to peel the backing off. And then with our zipper facing right side down, checking again that your pull is the side that you want it on, we're going to line up the bottom center with the top of our bottom piece. Line up the little notches first, and then pressing from the center outwards, just smooth that zipper tape down, making sure there's no bubbles in it. Keep the pull out of the way. Just slide that down all the way to the end. You can slide your zipper back and forth as you need to make sure that the edge of your tape is lined up with the edge of your vinyl, as sometimes the spot where the pull is can have a little bit of a bump there. Grab your pocket lining piece. Remove the backing from one end, and then you're going to line the edges of your pocket piece up with the edges of your exterior accent vinyl piece there, not with the tabs. So we're sandwiching the zipper between the bottom exterior piece of the bag and the pocket lining piece, and lining it all up with the edge there. And then you want to press that down. So we have got exterior, the zipper there, if you can see that piece of the little bit of yellow there, and then this is our pocket lining piece. And if I show you this way, you can see this is the order that it is. Exterior, bottom, zipper tape with the teeth facing down onto the exterior, and then the lining piece, right side, also facing down onto the exterior. So from where we are now, you can see the back of the pocket lining, the back of the exterior, and then the zipper tape facing down onto the exterior of the bag. We're going to go over to the sewing machine, and we're going to use a zipper foot to sew along the edge of this zipper, somewhere between 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch. Making sure to not get too close to your zipper teeth, and keep a consistent line so that you can get a nice straight zipper. Then what we're going to do is fold it back open, fold all those layers down, and top stitch. So I have my narrow zipper foot on, and I'm going to be using a seam allowance of 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to back stitch and then continue along here using this outside edge of my zipper foot as a guide to make sure that I have a consistent straight seam there. When you come to the zipper pull that you can't see but you can feel, you can slide that out of the way. I slide it towards me first, and I will sew down to here, thereabouts, and then I will slide it back up. Okay, pausing here, grab my zipper pull from underneath, it's just in here, and I'm just going to slide that back past the zipper. It's now up here at the end so that I can continue to get a straight line with no bump as I go past the zipper pull. Back stitching again at the end. Now we're going to open this out. You can see there we have our zipper tape sewn in. We're going to fold the lining out of the way. So I like to pull on both parts to get a nice fold there. If you have a clip handy, you can also grab a clip and clip the side there. And then I just like to pull on the zipper tape just to make sure that it's nice and flat. Roll the seams out a bit. Pinch it again on the other side. Now I'm going to switch over to my regular zipper foot. I'm actually using a Teflon foot. I almost always use the Teflon foot. Now we're going to top stitch down this side the same way as we did with this bottom part here. And as we go, I just like to put a little bit of tension on that zipper tape just so you get a nice even top stitch line without that rolling in at all there. So I'm going to set my stitch length back to my preferred top stitching length, which may vary based on your machine. My needle is in the far left position, back stitching in the side seam there. Turn 90 degrees. Now I'm going to take my zipper pull here and I'm going to slide it back out of the way. I'm going to grab, this is the pocket lining piece, and I'm putting a little bit of tension on that from the back. And I'm also, I can show you here, I'm putting a bit of tension here, and I'm also going to put a bit of tension here. Try to smooth this fold out as much as possible. You can, again, take it back to your table, put some double-sided tape and finger press that, and then it will stay in place nicely for you. I'm just going to hold it in place and just sew along using the inside edge here lined up with this fold to get a nice straight top stitch line. Then I'm going to slide my pull up with the needle down, raise the presser foot, slide the pull past, lower the presser foot again, and just keep that tension to get a nice even line. You are at the moment sewing through this fold here, your zipper tape, and also the lining piece, and that will keep that lining nice and snug out of the way. Turn 90 degrees and finish your seam, your top stitching line in the seam allowance. So you can see we have sewn along the top here, and then on the back that lining is sewn down. Now we're going to attach the top accent piece. We're going to remove that backing paper and lining up the center mark that we made earlier with the top center mark on this zipper tape. We're going to do the same thing as we did with the bottom section and press it down from the center outwards. Move that pull out of the way so that you have a nice flat edge to your zipper tape. Push it all the way to the edge, pressing that down. Then we're going to flip it over and trim some of these threads. Now we're going to remove the backing piece from this tape at the bottom that will become the top of our exterior pocket. And then we're going to line that up with the top edge of the zipper tape. We are going to make sure that the edge of the pocket here is lined up. Press that down. Same on the other side. Press that down, and then we are going to press that onto the back of the zipper and smooth that down. We're going to head back over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew this top side with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance again. Then we're going to fold it up and top stitch along that part of the vinyl there. Switching back to my zipper foot and making sure that my stitch length is set to my construction stitch length, not my top stitching length. I'm going to sew down this seam. Back stitch. Making note again of where the zipper is. Mine is right here, so I'm going to sew to here, then I'm going to slide the pull out of the way. Now I'm going to fold that open, and I'm just going to finger press that down there. And then I'm going to switch back to my Teflon foot, increase my stitch length for top stitching, and putting the same little bit of pressure on that seam there, just a little bit of tension on it. I'm going to sew this side, then turn it, sew down here, and then back stitch again in the other side seam. Make sure that your pocket lining is out of the way. Slide that zipper pull out of the way. Sometimes it's easier to turn the fabric with the needle down. And then just back stitch in that side seam there. The other thing that I'm going to do while I am here is baste this exterior pocket into the side seams here, using just the same stitch length that I have for my top stitching. Make sure the layers are nice and flat. I like to sew from the top to the bottom so that if there's any wrinkles, it meets at the fold and not bunching up at the top of the zipper. We're going to be sewing the side seams at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I am doing my basting stitch at about 3/16 of an inch. And then so that I can go top to bottom again, this side I will be doing from the front. Just make sure it's smoothed out there. And then we will head back over to the cutting table to trim some threads. Now it's time to trim some threads and trim this exterior panel down to the correct size. Because we added the accent pieces, we do have some excess in the height of this pattern piece. I would always rather have a little extra at the end than not have my pattern piece be long enough. First, I'm going to do the sides. So we want our panel here to be the same width as our exterior back piece. So we want 12 inches wide. And the threads from our seams at the top will get trimmed off here too. Move those out of the way. And then we want also the other side to be nice and neat. Slide that pull out of the way. And then just trim that there. Now, this panel here with the seam allowances that I used is about 1/2 inch too tall. So we can trim it down from the top here and then have a smaller accent at the top, or we can trim it from the bottom. The consideration at the bottom being that we have our fleece here, but I am actually going to trim it from the bottom just to show you how you would do that. And I also like the look of the thicker accent at the top. So lining that up there, we want this piece to be 11 inches tall. Now I realize I'm doing it sideways here, but we want 11 inches. So I'm going to just cut the bottom here. I've got 11 inches from here to here. Then we need to redo the boxes. Going from the bottom seam, we're measuring again, and we need to take off the 1/2 inch here. Your specific measurements may be different depending on what your seam allowances were at the top there when we were sewing on our accent pieces. So just grab your ruler and just measure that. There will be a little bit of fleece in the seam allowance, but with just being on one side, it shouldn't cause any problems. You can peel it back and trim it if you wish. You can avoid that by doing your trims off the top. You can take a greater seam allowance. I just like to have a bit of buffer there. This front piece should now be the same size as your back piece. You can see there that it is. And now we are ready to finish constructing the bag. I have my lining pieces here. For this particular bag, I have decided not to do an interior pocket. I do have a tutorial on how to put an interior pocket on a bag that I will link in the comments, so you certainly could add that in. We also need our zipper end tab and the piece for our D-ring. We need the 2 D-rings. I like to use a little scrap of waterproof canvas. You can use a scrap of Decaville, something else just inside of the strap, just to give it a little bit of extra strength. I'm going to cut this to be the same length, 6 inches. Then I'm going to grab my double-sided tape and just put it straight down the middle there. Peel off the backing, and I will just put that in the center there. I am using 1-inch hardware, so my piece here is 2 inches wide, and it will be folded to the middle. You want your connector piece to be double the interior width of your hardware. What I'm now going to do is grab a pen, and I'm going to mark the center line. Grab more double-sided tape, and I'm just going to put that straight down the middle there. Peel the backing off. Fold that to the center. You can press this if you wish, or you can use a seam roller. Then we are going to cut that into 2. Take it over to the sewing machine, and we are going to top stitch around the exterior of these 2 pieces. Again, as I have been doing throughout, I'm using the edge of this presser foot as my guide. I start on the very edge, the short end, and then my back stitching will be inside the seam on the bag. Finishing again at that short end, then repeat on the other one. Grab your D-ring and slide that onto your connector. I'm just going to pop a clip on the bottom of that and set that aside for now. So you have your 2. We're just going to set those aside. Now we're going to get the zipper ready for the top zipper. We're going to take our piece that we cut earlier, that is 2 inches by 1.5 inches. We're going to fold it in half, short end to short end, to create a piece that is 1 inch by 1.5 inches. Make a fold, crease it, and then we're going to fold the ends in again to the center fold there. You can press with an iron, you can finger press. I like to use my little seam roller here. Press those down and fold that in half so that you have a double fold piece with the raw ends on the inside there. I'm going to fold that over. I'm going to grab a clip to hold that there for now. Now we're going to grab our zipper by the yard and another zipper pull. You need your exterior back or front. You can use either piece, they're the same size. The way I like to measure the tape that I'm going to use is put it against the exterior piece and then cut it with just about a 1/2 inch extra buffer on the end there. Now we're going to put the pull on our top zipper. Having a look at your zipper by the yard, note which side the teeth come out slightly further on. For this one, compared to the one we did earlier, the teeth are slightly further out on the right side. So we're going to open up our zipper tape, grab your zipper pull, slide it on the right side first, pinch it, putting a little bit of tension on the tape there so it pulls the teeth all the way to the right side. Take the left side of the tape, open it up a bit more, and you're going to slide it in, and then you're just going to pull that down, and then note where the teeth start to click together, push with your index finger and slide it on. Then you can see that the teeth are lined back up. If you find after you push your zipper pull on that the incorrect side is further out, take it back off and try again. If this is too far that way and there's a gap there, again, take it off and slide it back on. The reason being that you want that to be matched up the same way as it was when you started so that you don't have a bump in your zipper here. So we'll slide that on. We're going to then grab our tab that we made just before and slide that onto the end. We're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're just going to sew down the end here, top stitching that tab onto the end of the zipper. If when you pivot, your stitch line is too close to the edge, with your presser foot down, lift your needle and then just slide it over ever so slightly and then drop your needle back down. I like to use my finger here to just push that tape in towards the edge here so that the end of the tape here is tucked really well into that fold on the zipper tab. This little bit here is where I reposition the needle. That is going to be in the top seam, so you won't see that. So don't be concerned if you had to reposition your needle if you end up with the little notch sticking out there. Now we have our end tab on our zipper. We are ready to do the top zipper on the bag. So let's move some of these things out of the way. For this, we are going to need our D-rings, our 2 exterior pieces, our 2 lining pieces, and our top zipper. You will also need your double-sided tape. The first thing to do is to position the D-rings onto the exterior of the bag. I prefer to have my D-rings in the top of the bag. Some people in crossbody bags like to put them in the side seam. I find that puts too much strain on the side seam and also on the D-ring connector. I find that the vertical stress is more evenly distributed, so that's where I choose to do mine. So we're going to grab these 2 tabs and we're going to place them, one on the back and one on the front. The reason being that that also distributes the weight a little more evenly. When the bag goes together, there will be one on the left-hand side and one on the right-hand side, and then the strap will go across like that. I choose to have them on the right side of the bag because I have my zipper opening on the left side. If you have the zipper opening this way and your tab this way, then if the bag is on your hip, then the strap connector gets in the way of opening the zipper up. However, if you carry your bag on your right hip, then you may want to have it the other way around. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this D-ring here. The way that I position that is, first I'm going to lay my zipper tape onto the exterior of the bag. I like to have the very end of my tab here 5/8 of an inch from the outside edge. So I'm going to lay that there, and then I can see that the position that I'm going to want my D-ring is 1 1/8 of an inch from this edge. So I'm going to grab my D-ring and I'm going to lay it down here. It needs to be D-ring facing in towards the main part of the exterior. I also like to have about 1/2 inch overhang. That will help with any stress on the D-ring. If there's that little bit extra hanging over there, you're less likely to have it pull out at the sides like that. You can also optionally place a rivet after we sew the zipper to further support that D-ring connector right there. So 1 1/8, I'm going to grab a clip. I'm going to clip from the right, clip from the left, with 1/2 inch overhang from the edge here, the uppermost edge of the exterior here, that's 1/2 inch. Then we're going to grab our exterior piece. Because that's going to be mirrored, we're placing them on the same side at this point, but then eventually this will be around here and it will be across here. Sorry, not mirrored, I guess reflected. So I'm going to line that up. You can measure, or you can do it the way that I'm doing and just place it on the top of your other piece to make sure that it matches up. And then again, you want it to be 1/2 inch over the edge, and then we can clip that in place. So just so you can see that that is consistent, it's 1 1/8 inch and 1/2 inch over the edge there. I'm going to grab that clip and I'm going to clip that on the right, clip it on the left. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to baste this. I'm going to go back and forth over this end seam here 3 or 4 times to reinforce the D-ring connection to the main body of the bag. I'm going to keep the basting stitch inside of the seam allowance. The seam allowance at the top here will be about 5/16 of an inch. So I'm going to sew at 1/8 of an inch with a long stitch length so that I'm not overly perforating the material. And then I'm going to repeat that on the other piece. What we now need to do is have our front and back pairs of the interior and exterior. So we have our front exterior and our back exterior. And then we have our back interior and our front interior pairs. Your lining pieces may be identical. If you did decide to go and add a zipper pocket, you can choose if you want that to be on the inside of the front or the inside of the back of the bag. When I add an interior pocket to my crossbody bags, I prefer to have it on the back of the bag, particularly if I have a front zipper pocket, so that the contents of the 2 pockets aren't banging together. So if you have a pocket on your back exterior, then you know which one that is. I have a tag on mine, but other than that, I don't have anything else. So it doesn't really matter which one I use. I'm going to set this aside. I like to start my zipper from the front of the bag. You will need your prepared zipper and you will need your double-sided tape. The way that I install my zippers is very similar to the butler method that you may or may not be familiar with. Starting at 3/4 of an inch from the outside edge where you want your zipper to open from. So for me, this is the front of the bag. I want it to open left to right. I'm going to place double-sided tape all the way along and across over the top of that D-ring, all the way to the edge. Then, with a lining piece reflected there, again, 3/4 of an inch all the way along. And then we will apply the double-sided tape to the exterior back, but it will be the other way around because the open end on this one will be at the other side. So with the exterior here, we're starting 3/4 of an inch from this end. And then for the lining, 3/4 of an inch here. So just to give you an idea of how that will go together, this is the exterior back here, and this is the exterior, sorry, the interior back. And they will be like this together. So the zipper will open on at this end where the gap is. But starting with this one, with your zipper tape, with the pull on and the tab, we're going to peel off the backing, placing the tab right up against the D-ring with the edge of the zipper lined up with the edge of the vinyl. You can trim this little bit of overhang here if you choose to. I tend to just leave it connected, but I just make note in my mind of where the edge of that zipper tape should be. Press that down onto the double-sided tape, nice and firmly. The smoother your installation, sorry, the smoother your zipper is stuck down to that double-sided tape, the smoother your final zipper will be. If it's wavy here, then you will have a wavy zipper on your finished bag. Smoothing that down. Grab your lining piece. Peel off that backing. Then the open end is the end of the zipper that is open. There's a bunch of threads in the way. Then lining up the top edge, press that all the way along, nice and smooth, so that you have your zipper sandwiched between the layers. So we have here, exterior front of the bag, zipper opening on the left-hand side, teeth facing down to that vinyl, and then our front lining piece, sandwiching those layers together. Flip the bag over so that your opening is now on the right side. The reason being that we will sew from the top down this way, so that we are sewing from the closed end to the open end. We are going to turn the zipper out when we get over to the machine. So grab a pen and mark 3/4 of an inch on the back of your exterior front. When we sew here, we're going to be sewing. I like to use 5/16 of an inch. You can use 1/4 of an inch. I use the width of my zipper foot to get a nice consistent line. We're going to sew all the way down here. Then we're going to stop at this mark here. We're going to raise the presser foot, open out the zipper, turn it 90 degrees, and then continue sewing. We are then going to back stitch and then sew another little line down here to hold that zipper at the 90-degree angle. Starting at the very edge of your fabric here, we're going to be sewing down here. When you get to this D-ring part, it is a little bulky. So if you have a hump jumper, you can use that under your presser foot just to help support that stitch as it goes over that. If you don't have it, you can just use something like your ruler. You can pop that underneath your presser foot and that will give the extra support there too. I am using a construction stitch length. I like 2.4. For vinyl, you may need a longer stitch length. It will depend on your sewing machine. Again, like we have previously, make note of where your zipper pull is. Mine is right here. So when we get close, I'm going to slide it out of the way and then slide it back. Please note that your zipper is open at this end, so do not slide your pull all the way, or you may slide it off and then you'll have to go back and unstitch and get that pull put back on. Just popping this under here for a little bit of support, being careful of the needle. just as it comes down off that bulk. Now I'm going to slide my pull towards me, just to about here. Keep going along the top there. Then I'm going to slide it back so I can continue all the way to this mark. Well, when you get to the mark, I like to back stitch a stitch here, raise my presser foot, then I open the zipper tape, and then I turn it to the side. Use my finger under here to flick that a little to get that 90-degree turn as flat as I can. Holding that in place, drop the presser foot back down, and then hold the two layers for your exterior and your lining together, as they do tend to slide a little as they go over to the bulk, as they go over the bulk of the zipper. Go all the way to the end, and then I back stitch till just before the zipper teeth. Raise the presser foot, turn it, and pulling those teeth out of the way again, I lower the presser foot, so straight down to the edge, perpendicular to the line, the seam we just sewed, and then off again. You can see here, this is the mark that we made where we've turned. The teeth are just outside of that mark, and then this little stitch line keeps that from unfolding. Now we're going to flip this around, open that out. I like to put a bit of tension on this seam before it's top stitched, just to keep it out of the way. Grab a couple of clips and just pop them along the edges there, just to keep that lining out of the way while we do the other side of the zipper. Now what we're going to do is put the exterior back onto the zipper here. Peeling off this double-sided tape, we are going to line up the edge here, the side there, with this side here, at the same time as we are lining up the top edge with the edge of the zipper tape. The D-rings can get in the way a little bit. If you start with the side seam and then press it down, and just press along that edge there. And then you can come to this side, line it up again. There's no double-sided tape at the very edge there because that's where we're going to be turning the tape. You press that down and flip it over to get it nice and neat. Again, making sure that it is flat as possible. As the smoother it is on the tape, the smoother it'll be on the top of your bag. Just tucking that D-ring out of the way a bit. Smooth that down. Then take your other lining piece, peel the tape off, and then we're lining this edge up with this edge here. Just pressing it down, sandwiching that zipper in between the exterior and the lining. Again, you can slide your zipper pull out of the way to make sure that the zipper is nice and flat. Because we are going to be sewing from the closed end to the open end so that we can do our turn, this time we're sewing with the zipper tape facing down. What I like to do is, instead of using the lining piece to make our 3/4 of an inch mark, I like to use the exterior piece. So I've got that mark there at 3/4 of an inch, and I also like to check just by folding that over at that mark there to see where the turn is on the other side of the zipper. And if you remember, I pointed out that the mark on the back was just inside where the zipper teeth are, and that is just about perfect. So that will be the same thing on this other side, which means that the ends of the zipper will line up, which means that you'll get a nice neat closure on your bag. So we're going to head over to the sewing machine and sew along this edge here at 5/16 of an inch. That's the width of my zipper foot. You can use 3/8 of an inch if you like. You can use 1/4 of an inch, whatever your preference is for your own zippers. You can use that as long as you're the same on both sides. Back stitching at the start. Something to be aware of is that there's a D-ring right here. So I'm going to put my hand inside and just make sure that that's pulled out of the way. And then sew along the edge there and just keep that pressed down. I'm watching out for that zipper pull when we get to it. We will slide it back out of the way. Letting that pull. Another D-ring here. What I'm also going to do is just grab this part of the bag here, and I'm just going to open that zipper up. And that just gives a little bit more room for this D-ring here so that we can get past it without as much bulk. It's just gone a little crooked there, so we're just straightening that back up. That's why having the zipper foot as the guide is so handy. Sewing up to where we've made that mark. Using your hump jumper if you need to as you come down off that connector. Back stitch. Raise the presser foot. Turning the tape. Using your thumb, so your forefinger under here to just kind of flick that out to get a nice neat turn. You can use a stiletto too, if you like. Holding that back out of the way, drop the presser foot back down, supporting the zipper tape here and the fabric here. We're going to sew over the end, all the way to the end, and then we're going to back stitch back up to where that zipper is, stopping just before the teeth, raise the presser foot, turn it 90 degrees, and then grabbing the tape again, I'm going to pull that to the side and then sew on the outside of it. And that just holds that tape out of the way. Remove any clips that you still have on your bag. Now what we're going to do is snip our zippers, and we're going to just seal the ends of those. So I'm just going to clip this and trim the threads, seal the end, and then the same on the other side. You can trim any threads as you go. Now we're going to open it out and check the zipper. Slide your pull up. Make sure you're happy with the position there. So you can see the turns are lined up fairly well. And now we're going to go and top stitch these seams here. When we top stitch, we are only going to be top stitching through the exterior. We are not going to be top stitching through the lining. So what you want to do is turn your bag over and then put the lining from one side over to the other. We're going to go over to the sewing machine, and we are going to be top stitching down this seam here. The lining stays on this side, the exterior back, and the other lining piece also all stay on this side. Keep those well out of the way. What you can do to help get a nice fold here is just pop a little bit of double-sided tape in the seam allowance on the back here. All the way across, peel the backing off, fold that over, and just smooth it down. Repeat for the exterior back. This is the seam allowance on the exterior piece. The very top edge. And then you just put some tension on that, fold it over, press it down. Going to head over to the sewing machine and top stitch along this edge here and this edge here. I like to take my exterior that I'm not working on and just kind of roll it out of the way with the zipper open, making sure that your lining is well out of the way. Oh, do it this way. Starting in the seam allowance, increase your stitch length for top stitching, back stitching within the seam allowance, turn 90 degrees, reposition your needle if you need to, drop it back down, and then we're just sewing along this edge here, using the inside of the presser foot as a guide to get a nice straight top stitch line. As we get towards the zipper pull, keep that lining snug out of the way. With the needle down, raise the presser foot, slide the zipper pull past, and then I like to put a little bit of tension on that D-ring just to keep it out of the way. Drop the presser foot again. And then as you get close, you may need your hump jumper. To just help you get past that D-ring there. Grip it again as it comes down. Watching out for the needle. You don't want the needle to hit your hump jumper. Then pivot 90 degrees. And back stitch in the seam allowance there. Now we're going to repeat on the exterior back. So flip it around so that you have just one layer, your exterior back here, and on this side you have got your exterior front and your two lining pieces. We already smoothed that down with a double-sided tape. Rolling this up, starting in the seam allowance, 90 degrees off from the top stitching line, back stitch, turn the project, drop the presser foot again. On this side, I like to push the D-ring out this way so that I can get past it no trouble. And then continuing along the edge of the exterior back. Making sure that the lining is staying out of the way. We can now slide our zipper pull back here. Raise the presser foot extra if you need to. Then you can move this entire piece to the back to really get it out of the way. Make sure your lining is here nice and smooth. Drop your presser foot, and we're just going to continue all the way to the end. And when we get to that D-ring, we can pull it slightly out of the way so it's a little further past the zipper teeth. Grab your hump jumper if you need it to just help you get over that bulk there. And then bring it back around to the front if you need to. To the end, turn 90 degrees, and some back stitch in your seam allowance there. What we have now is the exteriors and the interiors all joined together around the zipper, and we need to now sew up our side seams. The first thing that I like to do is line up the edges of our exteriors. So grabbing the two exterior pieces and just folding it open there at the open end of the zipper. I like to pinch, making sure that the folds here and here are lined up. I pinch those together, grab a clip and pop that on. Then I line up the bottom here where we'll be boxing the corner and pop a clip in there. Then a couple more clips along the edge here. Flip it around, lining up the two edges here where the fold is, and put a clip in here. Then also the bottom edge here where we'll be doing the box, and then along this side seam. I'm also going to put some clips in the very bottom here. We're going to leave a hole in the bottom of the lining for turning. I like to leave about a 4-inch gap. So our bottom piece here is 9.5 inches. So to leave a 4-inch gap, we're going to measure 2 3/4 from either end. And then that leaves just about a 4-inch gap to turn through. Grab some more clips, pop those on either side of that, and then down these sides here as well. Keeping your edges lined up as well as possible. And then what we're going to do is an important step, I think, for keeping your corners nice, and that is we're going to put a staple in on either end at the seam. So where you've placed that clip, just like to pinch that there, remove that clip, make sure it's lined up, and then I'm just going to put a staple in, and of course it shifted. What you can do is put a clip just on either side while you put that staple in, just to keep it in place. Slide it in, staple within the seam allowance. Make sure it's gone all the way through, and then repeat on the other side, checking that it's lined up at the fold there. And then you have your staples there, just keeping those edges nice and neat so that when you are finishing off your bag, your corners there are nice and lined up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sew around the entire exterior edge, the entire outside edge of the bag, starting at the open end and going across, back stitch, straight down this end. I like to reinforce over this corner seam here, all the way to the end, back stitch again at this corner, back stitch, straight across, back stitch here, down this end, reinforce where the interior and the exterior meet, down this end, back stitch, start again, back stitch here, and then back stitch. When we start sewing, we are starting with the lining, and I'm going to be starting with a seam allowance that is 5/8 of an inch in from this edge. You can measure that with your ruler. We're going to be sewing 5/8 up to here. Then after we turn this corner, we're going to start at 5/8, but we're going to gradually decrease the seam allowance as we approach the top zipper. The reason being that with the tapered lining, you will have a more snug fit in your finished bag. If we weren't doing this by measurements, if I had created pattern pieces for this, I would have made lining pieces that were already tapered for you. But because the whole purpose of this was to make one that was based just on measurements, we will account for the lining being a little baggy by taking a greater seam allowance as we're sewing the lining part. So starting here, 5/8 of an inch. Back stitch and sew straight to the end. You can cut your threads or you can just leave them attached. Starting again at 5/8 at this corner. Oops. Back stitch again. And then we're going to sew at 5/8. And when you get to about 1/3 of the way up, we're going to start gradually tapering as we approach the top zipper. And by the time we are about 2/3 of the way up, we are getting much closer to 5/8 of an inch. And then right when we get to the zipper, we want to be at that 5/8. With this presser foot, it can be a little tricky to get past this section here because that is where the zipper end tab is. So grab your hump jumper, slide that underneath there, and just take it nice and slowly. Then back stitch. Where this is folded here, that's where you're back stitching to reinforce that corner there. Then we're going to continue straight down this edge at 3/8 of an inch. Back stitch at the corner. Then we're going to turn, making sure your seam's lined up. 3/8 of an inch again. Back stitching, sewing along that bottom seam. Keeping your edges lined up. Back stitch again. Come around that corner. And then 3/8 all the way back up to the top zipper, the exterior that we are sewing now. This is the exterior part of the bag that we're sewing. Tapering the lining only so that it's not baggy on the inside of your bag. Okay, coming up to the other end of the zipper. It's not as bulky on this end that just has the turn zipper as opposed to where it's got the tab. Grab your hump jumper if you need it. Then in that fold there, we're just going to back stitch to reinforce that end there, and then keep going straight across. We're going to keep sewing at 3/8 of an inch until we get to about 1/3 of the way down, and then we're going to start gradually increasing our seam allowance as we get towards the bottom of the bag. So now we're going to get out to about 1/2 inch. And then as we get to the bottom 1/3 of the lining there, back out to 5/8. And we're going to back stitch. Then we're just going to back stitch again at the start of this last little section. When I get to where we have marked the opening here, and I back stitch, I like to finish my back stitching a little further away from the opening. I just find that makes it just a little bit neater when I turn it back through, when the threads are further away from the opening. And I probably should have started this one further away and then gone back and forth to make it just a little bit neater. Now what we need to do is box our corners. So we're going to head over to the table and then we'll get those clipped out. What we're going to do now is box our corners and get ready to close up the bottom seam of the bag. Before we clip these corners, we are just going to fold open the bottom of the lining here. That will help us when we turn it. I like to use the seam roller just to press it You can use an iron if you wish. Just press that open. Then we're going to go around and we're going to clip these corners. Opening up your bag, you put your hand inside. The way that I like to do my boxed corners is by folding one seam to the right and one seam to the left. And then I like to butt those folds there up next to each other, which gives you a nice, neat corner. So I just press those together. Then I'm going to grab a clip. Consider when you're doing this that the exterior pocket here wants to stay that way. So you want to have this side seam folded to the right and the bottom seam to the left. Just pop some clips on the side there as well. Then when we do this other side, we're going to keep the base seam going the same direction so that it's not sticking up or twisted in the bottom of the bag. And also, that's the way that this side seam wants to go. So we're going to fold that to the left, this one to the right. So that's going the same way there. Butting up the folds against each other. Put a clip in here. And then I like to put other clips just on the corner there just to keep the shape. The edge here should be flat or close to being flat. Same thing on the two bottom ones. Noting that you want this exterior seam folded the opposite direction to the lining to minimize bulk at the corner. So we're going to fold, that one's folded away from us, so this one's going to be towards us. And then the bottom seam of the lining the opposite way. Again, the two seams where they fold, pushed up against each other, and this should be nice and flat. I'm going to put a clip in there also, and then on either side. And then the last corner with the bottom seam folded that way. The side seam folded the opposite way. And the little folds neatly opposed. And again, nice and flat there. This canvas frays a little. You can, if you've used material like this, use pinking shears. When I have finished sewing it all, I'll go through and just use my pinking shears to clip the edges so that it's not going to fray on the inside. So we're going to head over to the sewing machine. When we sew the lining pieces, we are going to be using the same seam allowances we used here, the 5/8 of an inch to reduce the bagginess of the lining. And for the exterior, we're going to be using 3/8 of an inch. When I sew the edge, I like to do 2 passes to make sure that that is nice and strong. So sewing the exterior boxed corners at 3/8 of an inch. And then just going back. You can flip it around and sew forwards if you wish. Some machines don't handle back stitches particularly well. They get a bit of nesting. Mine doesn't do too badly. Make sure when you're sewing that your bottom edge here doesn't fold out. It's not entirely disastrous if it does. It just makes for a little bit more bulk. The reason that we have folded it the way we did is to just reduce bulk as much as we can in our seams. So if you wish, you could always turn your bag like this and just, rather than back stitch for your second pass, just sew forwards again. Well, not back stitch, I guess, sew backwards. So that's done there. Now for the lining, we are going to sew that at 5/8. And then the last corner, also 5/8. The reason being that because we took the bigger seam allowance here, if we take the same seam allowance off the box corner, that will make the finished corner the same size on the lining as it is on the exterior. Now I'm just going to use my pinking shears just to trim this seam allowance here. More because this canvas may fray a little than for the bulk, but it does also have that benefit. Also trim any loose threads that you have. Something else that I like to do is just check the seams to make sure that there's no threads from the inside that have gotten caught in your side seams. And I'm also going to go to the edge of the top zipper and just fold that out a little. And you'll see that that's important once we turn it. So I just like to press that out a little, just so it has that memory of being opened up. And this is a place that there's sometimes little threads that just get tucked in there. So you can just check to see if there's any, like the loose little ends sometimes get tucked in there. So just fold that open. Now we're going to turn this out through this opening, making sure that the zipper is open on the inside. We're just going to push the exterior right through that hole. And then use your hand to poke the corner. I like to grab 2 fingers and then just push a finger into each corner there, just to make sure they're poked out nice and neatly. You can check to make sure that they are the same size. You want to make sure that your edge here is lined up. And then on this side, the closed end of the zipper, if you put your hand inside where we folded that open just before we turned it, if you put your finger back on that side seam with it folded open, and then if you just take your thumb and push it onto that seam, it's kind of tricky to show you. Let me see if I can get a visual for you. So this seam here, if you open that out, this is where the zipper tab is. If you put your thumb on that and push it from the inside with that seam open, that's really going to help pop your corner out. So I'm just going to push that there. And then I'm just pushing up onto the lining. And then you can just roll it a little from the outside. And that should give you a nice, neat corner there. Okay, so just smooth out, move those scissors out of the way. Tuck the lining of the exterior pocket in. We are going to need to press this, but we are now ready to close up the lining. Any loose threads, grab those out of the way. So where we folded this before, you can see that it opposes really nicely now. So this is what I was talking about before. I used contrast thread so that you could see what I was doing. I probably should have, if I was doing it not for the video, then I would have used gray thread for this part. But where we didn't end our back stitching further away from the opening, you can see that the end of the thread is there. But this side, it's a lot neater. So I recommend doing it that way. starting and stopping your stitches, just a little further out. So you start here, sew back, and then keep going. And then that way you won't have these little threads sticking out. If you use a matching thread, then it's not as much of a problem. But for this one, it's just sticking out a little bit. That's okay, we can tuck it in. So back to what we were doing now. That is already ironed there, creased there, so that it's going to go together really nicely. I'm just going to grab a couple of clips, and then I'm going to head over to the sewing machine. This time I am going to use gray thread, and I'm just going to sew this opening closed. Now you can see where it ends here. So I'm just going to grab my disappearing ink pen, and I'm going to mark about 1/2 inch outside of that line. This one's easy to see because there's a little bit of thread there. Another mark there, and then that is where I'm going to sew from this line to this line. And I'm going to sew at about 1/16 of an inch, pinching that together. Now that does create a small ridge in the bottom of the bag. If you do an interior pocket, some people do like to birth their bags through that interior pocket, or you can do hand stitching to just sew that together like a ladder stitch. I just do it on the machine, and I just try to get it as close to the edge as I can. And if the lining is not too loose, then it does still sit pretty nicely down in the bag, and it doesn't seem to be too much of a problem. So we're going to go and sew that. I barely even need to clip it because we pressed it, and so it's really just sitting in place really nicely. So we'll go and close that up. The last thing that we'll need to do after that is get our strap taken care of, and then we will be done. Starting where that mark is, I'm going to take a seam allowance of about 1/16 of an inch. I'm just going to drop that down, back stitch, and then continue nice and close to the edge, but make sure that I'm catching both sides of the lining to close up that opening. You can see that little thread from before. You can just try to tuck that in, and then back stitching again. I'm just going to melt these threads. I'm going to tuck this lining in. I will give this a press, but you can see there that the lining sits in there quite nicely without being baggy. You can see you've got some nice corners on your zipper. And then the last thing that we need to do is just get a strap for it. So as I said earlier, I will make a video for making a crossbody strap from fabric or from vinyl if you choose to. But for this particular one, I'm just going to use a webbing strap. The length that you want your strap to be will vary from person to person. The beauty of webbing is you can make it as long or as short as you want. I like to make my straps about 56 inches. I'm just going to cut that. Then I will melt the ends just to seal it so it doesn't fray. When I am doing a crossbody strap, I like to attach it to the slider first, as it's easier to sew near the slider when it is the first thing you put on, as opposed to if you do this end first. So tuck it through. You can fold the end over. I just like to slide it up so that it's close, but not so close that I can't get my presser foot in there. Then I put a clip on that. I'm going to go and I'm going to sew along here at about 1/8 of an inch, and then we will get those swivel clasps put on. When I am sewing these webbing straps, I like to start my stitches in the middle of the strap. You can do a bar tack if that is your preference. I tend to just go back and forth a few times. So you can see that's just sewn several times across, and then I'll tidy up the threads. Now we're going to pop the swivels on. With the folded side up, I'm going to slide the swivel this way so that it is facing the outside. Then take your webbing strap, slide it through the bottom here, and then through the top, and then pull it on. So we still need to trim those threads, but just so you can see. So you can see here that the swivel is facing the outside and the fold is on the inside of the strap. Then we turn it around, we come to the other end, grab the other swivel, and then making sure that it is backside up with the swivel this way, feed it through, and then you want to fold it that way. I like to fold it over once and then fold it again, and then I'm going to go and sew down this side here at the same 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Starting in the middle again, lower the presser foot. Then you can either spin it around or you can just sew backwards. A few passes over the same spot, and then we'll just go and tidy up those threads. And there you have it. That is your finished crossbody. The finished size that we have here is about 11 inches wide, and it is about 9 inches tall. The depth is 2.5 to 2 3/4 of an inch. So it's a reasonably good size. You can add slip pocket, zipper pocket, any of those other things. I will link the zipper pocket tutorial that I have already in the description if you wanted to add that on. And when I do get the crossbody strap made from the fabric as opposed to the webbing done, I will pop that in the description too. Let's just pop this on and see how it looks. You can obviously adjust that however you want it, but there you go. That is the Kleier crossbody, all finished. Thanks, everyone. I ran out of thread, bobbin thread. Goodness me. Then I will melt the ends. Whoops, off it goes. It's very disappointing